I just realized I'm like 13% of the way to my 100 book goal this year. Yeah, I don't know if that's gonna happen. I may just be perpetually trying to hit that 100 books in 1 year. It's a new month, so that means another monthly wrap up. If you like watching these kinds of videos, like this one where I'm going to talk about all the books I read in February, and you're interested in what movies I'm watching currently, you can now catch me on Twitch every Saturday, starting this Saturday, tomorrow, at 9 p.m. Eastern time, where I'll go through my letterboxed watches every week and we'll talk about all the horror headlines and everything happening in horror movie news and just hang out. The link for my Twitch is in the link tree that's always in the description of my videos. But for right now, let's talk about some books. I am very proud of myself for reading 2 nonfiction books again this month. That's 4 already in 2024. And the 2 I read this month were all thanks to me DNFing a book. My first book of 2024 that I DNF'd. So I mentioned last month that I was loosely following a nonfiction like horror crime book club that I found on Instagram because I want to read more nonfiction this year. That's one of my just personal reading resolutions. And their pick for February was Helltown by Casey Sherman. I got about 40 pages in and I DNF'd. It was a very quick and easy decision to DNF, which was surprising for me because normally I try and make it to about 100 pages before I decide that it's not for me, especially books that are a little bit longer. I try and hit that 100-page mark. So this is a true crime book about a serial killer on Cape Cod back in the 70s. First and foremost, a weird thing about this book is it's written in third person omniscient, which is strange when it's real people. The author's writing about how they felt on the inside and their thoughts, and especially for the victims of this serial killer, there's no way for him to know that, so it's just him making it up or just assuming, which I don't really agree with when it comes to real stories and real people. So that was a little weird. It was definitely unconventional for some of the true crime books that I've read in the past, but that wasn't enough for me to DNF. Within the 40 pages that I read, there were 2 murders already. Both times when the author was describing the victims, which were women, of course, the author felt the need to mention multiple times how small they were compared to the killer. Even using the you know, like using phrases like her diminutive frame or something just compared to this like hulking mass of a serial killer. Honestly, the language, particularly when it came to the female victims, at least in the 40 pages that I read, was gross and misogynistic and I didn't like it. So I very quickly just stopped reading it and we'll be getting rid of that book. So I went back to the true crime section and found a book written by a woman. Just figure it's probably safer that way. So I picked up Sex Cult Nun by Faith Jones. This is more of a memoir than anything, but it's Faith Jones's memoir of her time in the Children of God cult, being the granddaughter of its founder. It was a really eye-opening book, especially given the fact that this is from the point of view of somebody who grew up in this cult, like from the moment of her birth. So there's a lot of really interesting parts where she has to, of course, deconstruct the things that she's been taught her entire life, leading up to her decision to ultimately leave the cult. So I would highly recommend this to anyone who's interested in the topic. Definitely check your content warnings though for this one, because of course there are certain types of abuse that one experiences in a cult like this, and yeah, and our author describes the things that happened to her. I also read another nonfiction book about a favorite spooky author of mine, but I realized like halfway through reading it, because I'm gonna be honest, I didn't check, that it was a book published by St. Martin's, and in keeping in solidarity with the boycott, it's not a boycott of reading the books, it's just a boycott of talking about the books. It's a marketing boycott. So when I realized, I removed it from my story graph, so I wasn't logging it. I'll just keep it in my notes app that I read it in the month of February, and I will not be talking about the book or sharing what the book was. So then I read a quick little graphic novel for kids, technically, but it was so cute. It's The Skull by John Klassen. This is a Tyrolean folk tale about a little girl who comes across a old house in the woods and finds a skull who is tormented every night by its headless skeleton. It's a simple and spooky story with a touch of macabre humor that I found really enjoyable. I occasionally like to read some spooky stuff from the kids department or the middle grade department, even as an adult, just because I like to see the cool kind of creepy things kids get nowadays in the book world. I feel like they get a lot of cool, like, spooky stuff nowadays, and I'm low-key a little jealous. So this one was really good though, and really cute. I highly recommend. And the art, of course, is gorgeous. I love the art style of this. All right, next I read Butcher and Blackbird by Bryn Weaver. I did a reading vlog for this one for Valentine's Day because it's a dark romance novel. You can check out that reading vlog. I'll link it up here. In short though, as a lesbian, I was definitely not the target audience for this straight romance book. That's all I'll say about that. All right, next I read Slewfoot, A Tale of Bewitchery by Brahm. I've been intrigued by his books for a while. The covers of his books are very striking. Looks like he tends to write a lot about like folk tales, folklore in general. And I really like that. I love that subgenre. And the size of the books are unconventional. I can give a normal size paperback for reference here. Maybe a weird thing to point out, but sometimes it's something as simple as that calls your attention to a book. This book follows a Puritan woman, Abatha, who finds herself independently trying to keep her land and her farm, which, you know, during the Puritan times is a big no-no. And she enlists the help of a forest deity that she discovers near her property to help her in her road to independence. I've seen a lot of reviews of this comparing it to the film The Witch, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, and I would definitely agree. The vibes extremely similar, so if you like that movie, good chance you're gonna like this. I was really into the story, especially the way pagan practices are portrayed. As a practicing witch, I really appreciated that. The ending definitely had big good for her vibes. I would definitely put this in a good for her category of stories. There were just moments, small moments, throughout the book that I felt it was apparent that it was written by a man, being that this is from the point of view of somebody who is not a man. It was like little somethings throughout the book that just kind of called that to attention. Overall, not bad though. Still enjoyed the book. Then I read Out There Screaming, which is an anthology of Black horror stories edited by Jordan Peele. Normally when it comes to anthologies, there are bound to be stories that you don't love, you know, that you don't vibe with. That's the benefit to reading a lot of different short stories. There's a little something for everybody. I can honestly say with this one though, even the few stories that I just didn't like the most were still phenomenal. Like, there's not a single story in this that I hated or even disliked. It was basically just like I liked some stories a little more than the rest of them, and they were all great. I think this did a really good job too of really showing like the scope of horror, because them being like horror stories from a Black perspective is the theme, but the stories range from like folk horror, fantasy, contemporary, sci-fi. There's really something for everybody in here, genuinely. And I can honestly say I didn't want any of the stories to end. Like, I would pick up a full-length novel of any of these stories. But of course, as it is an anthology, I will call out my favorites really quick. So my favorites were The Writer by Tananarive Due, Origin Story by Tochi Onyebuchi, Reckless Eyeballing by N.K. Jemisin, Eye and Tooth by Rebecca Roanhorse, and A Bird Sings by The Etching Tree by Nicole D. Sconyers. Those were my absolute favorites out of all of them. Hands down, favorite read of the month. And of course, lastly, I did read The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. This was our February pick for Creepy Book Club. If you didn't know, I have a monthly horror book club. We read one horror or horror adjacent fiction book per month with an emphasis on diversifying our horror shelf. So if you like reading horror books with representation, you can join us at any time. I'll actually be live tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern time on this YouTube channel to talk about The Reformatory with everybody who read it. And you can follow along on the story graph. We do read-alongs for each book. And if you follow me on my Instagram, you'll be able to see what books we're reading next. We plan them out in advance. So if you go to my Instagram right now, like pinned at the top is the lineup for the first half of 2024. So you can see what's coming in March, April, May, and June if you just want to get ahead. So that's all I read in the month of February. I'd love to hear what you've been reading this past month in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, you can check out my reading wrap up from January. Then you can be caught up on everything I've read so far in 2024. I will see you next week with a new video that I can't think of what it's going to be on the top of my head, so I won't plug it. Until then, stay strange. Bye.